Welcome to Defending Our Children. Today I am flying solo without Craig, but JT John Turner has decided to join me. He is a member of our team. JT, I welcome you, and I'm glad that you're able to participate today. And we've got a lot to talk about with our kids. What have you to say?
Well, thanks for having me back. I always enjoy this format better than having to edit, an hour's worth of talking that we do on our group chat. I'm interested to hear about your notes, and I tell you, I get up every morning. My wife is watching some version of people complaining about the world that they live in, and the woman on the channel said, if they didn't act the way that they acted, she'd have very little to talk about. They make her job very easy. And I was like, yeah, there's really no lack of things to discuss, deep things even, as long as the world is kind of circling the bowl in these, trite topics, we can always kind of fillet them and at least sound, both magnanimous and smart at the same time. So.
Indeed. Well, in today's times, for sure, I was just mentioning to you before we started the show, how we are witnessing interesting times. And today, when you look at the kids, you look at the children, and that's what we're all about, is the children. I started thinking, what is going on in today's world versus the last, say, 4 generations? What was it like being a child when my parents grew up, and what was it like when their parents grew up? And there's a lot of good information. There's a lot of books and stories about generational differences. And, there have been great movies like The Sandlot. I mean, that's a great movie to watch about what it was like being a kid. And but when I look at today, I started wondering, and you and I have talked about various things along these lines about technology. And that's probably the biggest thing that we've had to see from our generation on, is the introduction of the television, computers, internets, phones, social media. And, what's your take on the evolution of technology and how it's impacted on our kids?
Well, not to be too grandiose, but when you think about what technology, what we're really talking about is the ability to do something other than live, right? Like back in the day, before there was written word, there was the telling of a story, right? Recently was in Washington, D.C., and I went to the Library of Congress, and there is Jefferson's library, that they're trying to rebuild, like from every book. Because he indexed everything. They know what they have. They know what they need. They're still looking for these books. But, his comment was basically, without books, he'd have no life. And so, going from books to radio, right? And radio being, okay, well, we have adult program, we have news programs, where everything was kind of, there in one room, and to move from radio to television, again, radio started to have programming for children that the parents weren't interested in. And TV did the same thing, but they still had the same kind of model. Like, there was prime time, which would have been the family time when programs were starting to move more into the adult, but they were still geared to the one room, one television family. But I recognized it was in the programming where we splintered the family. It was what times would be okay for kids, what times were okay for adults. And, with that, the previous modes of entertainment or learning were sidelined. Books were replaced. The parents back in the day be like, no, you're not listening to the radio. You need to read yada, yada, yada. Well, now we just are like, get off of your computer and watch television with me. Right? Like, get out of your cell phone. So when I see what's changed is if you splinter the family, you splinter the ability to manage what anybody's seeing for sure. And then, like, I know that you're going to get into is what does it do to the young person's brain, at a whatever age, that is detrimental to, how they develop and grow. So I tee that up knowing where you're going with that. I have my own thoughts on it, but I definitely think it starts with, the programming and how we've splintered that group. But please go ahead. I'm ready.
Well, I do remember reading to all my kids when they were, before when they were just starting to walk. And we would read to them, my wife and I would read to them every night. And eventually what would happen is they would take over reading the book. Now, what I'd noticed is they couldn't read, but they had memorized the stories. And then eventually they would learn to read. And I remember reading Harry Potter with my oldest, and I had a hard time reading that out loud. It's a very tongue-twisty book. And then my son took over because I couldn't read it fast enough. And, what's interesting is that when you're reading a book, and this is what I tell people that are becoming new parents, there is an anticipation. I mean, you've got to build the world that the author, you got to build it in your brain. There's a lot of things going on in your brain physically. You've got to, how many books have elicited the smell, the temperature, the sweat on the brow, the tension in the chest. I mean, all these physical things that you're leaning into and reading the book. And you always hear, somebody reading a book. You've read many books in your life that says, man, I just couldn't put it down. Right.
Right. That's true.
But it took you all the way to the end before you knew what happened. And you had to have patience. And that's what's interesting to me, is that you had to have patience because you had to patiently read the book. And you had to, and oftentimes it would take somebody, several days or a week or maybe even longer to read, depending on your skill. And yet what that did was it allowed it to, in my belief, that your brain to develop in a manner. It's almost like you're baking a pie, right? And if you do it properly, then the different portions of your brain develop properly. And I think this is one of the main ingredients that helps child development is reading, and why it's so important. And, what are your thoughts on that? And I can get into some other stuff.
Well, I would say, when I think about the best books that I've read, and I'm not a great reader. I've worn glasses, almost my entire life. Had problems in school because of my eyes, but also because of attention and issues that I couldn't understand. Now being 57, almost 58 years old, when I was growing up, there was no catch-all diagnosis for, hey, this is not something that he's doing on purpose, kind of thing. So basically, when you didn't pay attention, it was behavior only. Like it was just
that was the excuse, right?
That's that. Well, it was, and I get it with it in the absence of a polio diagnosis, you just can't walk and you're dying. There's no what's going on there. But with me, the books that would keep me were the ones that, when I gave it time, and you have to give reading time to have that brain stew start to congeal into a setting and grasp the story. So though, whether you were listening to somebody tell a story as a kid, you still had to do that. You still had to hear what the words were and make in your mind's eye that scene, that setting. And that was great because, it was a story you couldn't tell yourself because, when you're telling it yourself, what's going to happen next, right?
We're going to stop for a commercial break. We'll be back with more from Defending Our Children.
Hey, Tim James here, founder of ChemicalFreeBody.com, also the health coach for Craig Sawyer and Forrest Sealey. And I want to help working class people get their energy back and quit having all these health issues. Here's the problems. The average person is carrying around 6 to 12 pounds of impacted fecal material in your colon. This is not good. Number 2, we have terrible nutrition because the nutrition has been farmed out of our soils and processed out. Plus, processed foods are killing 4,300 people a day. We need good nutrition. Number 3, our gut microbiome's all jacked up from all these toxins and pesticides and stress. We have to balance that. We also have tremendous amounts of inflammation in the body, and we have an overload of toxins from heavy metals, radiation, and pollution. Craig and I and Forrest got together. We created what we call our Defending Our Health bundle. This is a bundle of our products over here at ChemicalFreeBody.com that will revolutionize your health. We've put them together. Green 85 is going to come in and supply you with all the nutrition you need. Our Gut Detox will take care of all that impacted garbage inside of you and keep it out. Toxin Detox will get the heavy metals, the radiation, and the pollution out. The Nano Silver, the Triple Action, will start balancing the gut microbiome, and the Turmeric 100 will start reducing inflammation in the body. You put it all together, and working class people can now get their energy back and their health back and start to heal themselves. We need you to be healthy so that you can fight for freedom and fight for these kids. Go to chemicalfreebody.com/DOC and check out the Defending Our Health bundle and all of the other wonderful products that we offer, and we look forward to helping you have the best life ever.
Welcome back to Defending Our Children. And JT, we were just talking about Rescue Roast. This is our coffee for Veterans for Child Rescue, and we have 3 different, we got medium, light, and dark roast. And look, if you're a coffee drinker, this is some really good stuff. Craig Sawyer, he found a roaster, a company that makes some of the best coffee, we believe. And this, all the money that we make from this coffee goes to our operations. And JT, I mean, we've had this together several times on operations. So anyway, go check out Veterans for Child Rescue and get some Rescue Roast. Now I'm back. Right. So we were talking about, and I do want to ask you this one question though. Sure. We were talking about reading in children and kind of the development of the brain.
Right.
Did you read The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings?
So no, because they were just too big. And as you said, the Harry Potter words, when I would have read those books being in school, I was having a hard time just getting, through the day. Wow. through the assignments and what the teacher was saying. I wish I could go back and spend time learning how to use the comma better. Even though I've read 3 or 4 grammar books on it, I still go, I don't know, maybe here, maybe one, not one. Is that a comma splice? I don't know. So
I struggle too.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I asked you that, and you've missed out on one of my greatest eureka moments when it comes to reading, is when the movie came out, Gollum looked and sounded exactly like I imagined as a kid. It really freaked me out. And what was interesting is I think the author, he wanted to paint a picture for the reader. Yep. And he did that in such a way that the filmmaker created exactly what I saw. And I've asked friends and they said, yes, he looked and it sounded exactly the same way we imagined.
Right.
Imagine the amount of brain power that you're developing. I think if you could measure horsepower in your brain while you're reading a book like that, you should be able to measure some serious activity that is very healthy.
More than probably any other thing, I think. More than math even, because math, you're in, there are rules, and those rules dictate where you go with a problem. With reading, the mind's eye can build any scenario. And I guess for you to be able to see, 35 years later, a scene that you're like, that's it, so I got it right, or I saw what they saw. And I feel that that's part of what we were getting to with the problem of what's happening today is that, we are not, we're inundated with so many things, opportunities for things, that we're not spending any time developing that mind's eye, right? We can do pretty much anything we want to do on our phone while driving to and from work, which is crazy, because when you think about what you really require to be safe in a car, you don't even realize that you're driving while you're doing this other thing. It's very unsafe, obviously. It's not optimum. But if you can do these things while you're doing something life-threatening like driving, well, then how much of your brain are you really utilizing? You know, how much of your creativity? You're really just kind of droning through it. And that's the way I would say that reading for me was when I was young. When you're not interested and you got to read the 500 words, or you got to do the thing, that it's, I think the real universe of value is in the reading and comprehending what you're reading, right? It's yes, you read it. Yes, you read it. But can you not tell me who the characters were? Because, you know, typically you're like, yeah, Bob and Tim or something like that. But can you tell me what they felt or what they were feeling? How did you feel? And I believe that in this day and age, unfortunately for everybody, and even my daughter, who's a wonderful human being, I feel that the media opportunities that she has dulled that sense. Because it's too easy to just look at TikTok videos. It's too easy to just see the jape, you know, the board hitting the guy, the baseball hitting a man in the junk, you know, all of that. Kitten videos, sure, but the worst part about it is if all you had were kitten videos, you would get tired of it and you would move on. You'd be like, boy, I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to go outside and play. But it never ends. And that is, I believe, what you're talking about, is that we have, not wanting to, but we have dulled our senses so much that it's not a surprise that the quality of the writing or of films has deteriorated over time, because they're just not thinking deep enough to get past going 120 minutes, you know. Look, books, even people are writing books that should have no business writing books because they could self-publish, right? Back in when we were kids, if they were published, it went through some wickets. They had to have a talent for it. You know, I'm sure people would say, I didn't like this, I didn't like that, but you know, Jaws, or you know, Peter Blattley, you know, all these folks that wrote
John Crichton,
yes, you know, pick anything. But Hemingway, although you have to be in a mood to read this guy because it is dry and on the nose, right? There is a build to it, and if you've ever read him or gotten to past the wow, come on, let's get to it, you know, feeling in his books, he's asking you to think harder about a thing. He's asking you to be in the story with the old man in the sea. He's asking you to be the man and feel like him. And despite his great day, his great catch, and you're like, wow, there's still half the book to go. It can't be the end, so something else has got to happen here. And you watch this man who is, you know, having the greatest day of days, his life just be torn from him, you know. And I think you would need to be older, maybe at our age, to understand, wow, how many times can you start over? You don't think that when you're a kid. You don't think about those deep meanings, the themes, right? College tries to teach you it. It's like, hey, read this, read that. You know, high school definitely doesn't try to teach it. They go read The Outsiders. You know, trying to connect you with kids your own age in story, and you're like, the difference between those teenagers and the teenagers of my day, it seemed like we don't do that. You know, we're not the Soches and the greasers, right?
Yeah.
But now as I'm older, I'm going, no, it's all the same. And I see the wisdom in it. But when I was reading it, it was like, this is just, of course we all read it. They made us read it, So I really think that the challenge that we have to overcome would be to encourage children to just keep on keeping on until you start thinking deeper about whatever it is. I would love to see, I mean, you can't put the genie back in a bottle, for sure. So it's not even worth talking about, well, boy, we really need to get rid of social media. It's not gonna happen. But what we can do is talk to our children about being insightful and have conversations with them that maybe are difficult to have because you haven't had them, especially this generation. We've tried, right? Because we grew up in a time without cell phones and PDAs and computers. And our desire to be good parents developed in a time when we had nothing but get in the car and drive to the ice cream shop, or play ball in the yard,
Indeed. Well, that is a lot more to unpack, folks. We'll be right back with Defending Our Children.
Are you or a loved one struggling with addiction? Rancho Milagro Recovery is an accredited drug and alcohol addiction recovery program treating the whole person through their lifelong recovery process. Our process incorporates both medication-assisted treatment and psychological therapy to help all aspects of an individual's mind, body, and spirit. Our lavish accommodation sits on 60 acres of outdoor greatness where your privacy and discretion is our utmost concern. Find lasting recovery and walk away from addiction one step at a time. RanchoMilagroRecovery.com.
Welcome back to Defending Our Children. And we were just talking about the generational differences of how kids grew up. And basically, I did a little bit of research, JT, on the last 5 generations. So you had the silent generation, the boomers, the Gen X, which you and I are Gen Xers. You got millennials, which are our kids. And then you got the Gen Zs, which is the latest generation. And so you kind of touched upon something. You said that books and radio and TV, they were a distraction of living. And I really understood that, but I think our listeners may not understand that. So let's go back to the silent generation. And this generation went through 2 world wars. And if you really study World War II, especially, if you study the history, we did a lot. There were a lot of young people. I'm talking about under 18 that did a lot to help us win this war. Okay. There were people that went and fought, and we barely, I wonder if we would not have had the atomic bomb, if we would have won the war. We had so much to deal with, but in those days, life was a lot different because it was about living. And what was living then? It was just staying alive, and kind of like when you're in Africa and you're the gazelle, you got to be faster than the cheetah, right? That's what living it was back in the silent generation. And because of the development of a child, they grew up quicker, right? I think their logic chip, the front part of their brains, developed faster. So tell me what your thoughts are in that regard as it pertains to the kids today.
Well, I definitely, I always try to avoid, the broad stroke things were, better than kind of mentality, because what we do know from the wisdom of the ages is that it's all the same. The names have changed. It may look different, painted with a different brush, but it's the same. Our grandparents complained about the rock music I was listening to, calling it acid rock or whatever. Like, you're going, what are you talking about? And then me, growing up, in a Baptist mindset in a youth group and leaning toward, hey, sex, drugs, and rock and roll are not, the optimum way of living, with my judgments toward that thing, having issues with metal music or, anything. But as I got older, I started to see that, it's the same. But when you think about the world wars and what they went through and that development, what they had to do to survive, war puts you in a survival mode, for the families, for all, for everybody involved. So they didn't have time to contemplate, the evils of, media per se, right? But it was really in the absence of a demon, of a devil, that they started to create the problems that I think we're seeing today. Instead of, recognizing that, hey, you can turn your channel off, turn it off, right? They were like, well, who's making this content, right? Who are these people? Are they communists? And so you go back to the 50s, late 40s, when the bomb created a whole nother level to deal with, right? Of things that we didn't have to worry about before. And you wonder who defined that fear, right? We went from the Cold War was basically, I'm not going to blow you up. You're not going to blow me up, but I'm going to fund other people that are going to make you spend your money. Or I'm going to, make your kids worried about something, that kept, really kind of made the sci-fi, we got, going to space, getting to the moon, all these things. So all of the evil spurred good things as well. But I suppose the big fail is between the people that had to do something in those greater generations, as we might call them, was that they had to do something, right? They weren't left to just ponder. As we are today, most people are conceptualizing. It's concepts. It isn't whether they're going to eat or not. As you have said before, and you've said it, it's like, look, there was a time when if something broke, you had to fix it. There was no calling anybody, right? And if you didn't fix it, you starved. An oversimplification of things, a quicker timeline of things, but it's true. And if you go back to, hey, if we don't kill something, we don't eat. If we don't plant it, we don't eat. Those were the maxims of what are still true today, right? Except that we live in a world where people have access to being saved by the government.
I want to touch on a point right there that's very interesting, and it seems so simplistic. But go back to when your kids were toddlers and they're running around the house and you're chasing them with the pillow, whatever, and they trip and they fall and they bonk their head, not really hard, because hard and you're gonna. Oh, I know. You jump down and you pick that kid up. Are you okay? The kids start screaming because they're registering your fear.
Right.
And I tell you this because we learned as young parents, oh, you're okay. They might have had blood coming out of their head. It's okay. We're going to be okay. Here, let's put a Band-Aid on your boo-boo.
Right.
But my point is that if you wake up in the morning, if you're of the generation and you wake up in the morning and your bow, all you had was a bow to hunt, and it's broke, then you'd say, well, I guess we got to make another bow. Not, oh my God, we're going to die, we can't eat.
Yeah.
And I think when you in society as a whole, what we've done is we're assaulting a society with so much information that everything is a crisis. And if you watch the news, everything is a crisis. I mean, now they're naming snowstorms. Okay. Right. I mean, in their polar vortex, and they're using these terms. And you and I have grown up in this land our whole lives, and we've been through snow, we've been through storms, we've been through all sorts of stuff, but they make it's always the end of the world. And I think that conditioning is horrible for our kids.
Well, sure. If you look at but what has news become? News has become the entertainment. Before it was War of the Worlds was a story about the end of the world. And it was like a story. Now, if everything is the end of the world, when you think about what we have learned, what I have recognized is the true wisdom is that, if you're getting your news and your entertainment from the same box, right? If you're getting your morality from the same box that you get your pornography, or if, whatever it is that you're drinking from the poison well. And the only thing that you really need to do is if the box is telling you that the world is ending, go outside and stand there. Listen. And go, oh, wow, the storm isn't going to murder me. Oh, wow, there's not gunfire out there. Oh, wow, I can still breathe clean air. Then you can go, you'd probably notice that there's some things you need to do in your yard.
Yeah.
And that's really like in what was it? I guess the Truman Show, when Truman finally says goodbye and they're all sitting there like, well, now what do we do?
Yeah.
And they turn the TV off and they realize, oh, there's this other thing going on, right? And that's, I suppose that's probably the closest thing we have to putting the genie back in the bottle is just at that particular time for our children anyways, turning off the box. But don't leave them to figure it out all themselves, because that'd be unfair. Now, back in our day, they were like, they turned the TV off and said, go outside. It's like, there's nothing to do, but do something or I'm going to give you something to do. And that was always terrible. So,
sure. And, this is where the child development is very important from a young age, because what you have to do is right now, if you have young adults in the house like I do, trying to explain stuff to them, they don't want to listen. And it's because they're already trying to jump to the result as opposed to jumping to listening or listening to what you have to say. And it's kind of annoying. And so anyway, folks, we got to stop for a commercial break. We will be back with more from Defending Our Children.
Hey, Tim James here. When I was 37 years old, I had some severe gastrointestinal issues. I was tired, fatigued, wasn't feeling good, skin issues. My health was a mess. Let's just put it that way. Now I'm turning 52 this year, and I have abundant energy. I'm able to trail run and kick the butts of my 22 and 24-year-old sons. Yep, that's right. And do push-ups and all this other fun stuff. How did I do it? Well, one key ingredient, if you want to get healthy, if you want to get your energy back, you want to get your vitality back, is real nutrition. Our soils have been so over-farmed, 85% of the nutrition is gone today, and then the rest is processed out through these processing plants. So what we have created is a formula called Green 85 Juice Formula. You can take 1 scoop in the morning, and we suggest you do another one in the afternoon, about a half an hour before dinner, and you will revitalize your health. You will get your health back. You will cut your hunger cravings, and you're going to actually cut your grocery bill in half. This product will literally pay for itself because you cannot eat as much food because your cells are now getting the nutrition they need. Go to chemicalfreebody.com/DOC. That's chemicalfreebody.com/DOC. Get Green 85 today and energize your life and your health so that you can feel as good as I do and Craig does and Forrest. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.
Welcome back to Defending Our Children. And I'm sitting here speaking to JT Turner. He is a friend. He is a colleague. And he's a filmmaker. He's a psychotherapist. Is that the right term? Psychologist,
psycho and a therapist at one time.
He's a therapist. He's worked with children for many years. He's also a veteran, retired from the Navy. He's worn a lot of hats, and his experience has given a lot for he and I to become friends and talk about. And so we were just kind of talking off on the break, and one of the things I started thinking about, as you were mentioning, is what was life like when we grew up? And it was, you mentioned turning off the box. Well, for us, our parents whenever we weren't in school, they basically just shoved us out the door.
Yeah.
And we spent, I was blessed. I grew up in a country town, and we had 3 lakes in my neighborhood. And we built a fort. Somebody had a trampoline. I had a dirt bike. We had a park, kickball, football, But one of the things that I really gleaned back is what I learned, my social skills. And I was a very socially awkward kid. I wasn't popular. I was an athlete. That was where I gained my popularity. So I was very grateful. I really felt like I grew up in a utopian environment. And what shaped my being today is what I called a logical evolution or a logical experiences. So if I did something, if you and I had grown up together and we were playing football, if I tackled you too hard, you'd let me know. You either let me know by tackling me a lot harder the next time, or you would get up and push me and say, dude, that's not cool. We learned really quick. And what would happen is that front part of your brain starts firing where your logic chip is. And I would register, hey, I hit JT a lot harder than he'd like. And I would respond accordingly. And we would just negotiate. And that's a very simplistic version of what it's like. But it's important, right? It's super important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the social contract, really. I mean, the golden rule is built from, hey, do unto others as you would have done to yourself, right? To do unto others as you would have them. And I think people just stop at the do unto others part with the understanding that, well, you know how it goes. When in fact, if you emphasize the as you would have them do to you, which means if you would like people to give to you, then give to them. It's just kind of like, it's like saying, all due respect. What's coming is the most disrespectful stuff, right? It's like this blanket. You can't blame me for saying it kind of thing when you're like, no, it's not a get out of jail free card, because we know what you're about to say is more than likely disrespectful, right? Otherwise, it's just debate. You don't have to say all due respect. You should have that social contract. So, yeah, I think that when you think about kids, as a behavioral scientist of sorts, I recognize that behavior is really the only mechanism we should use to measure how things are going, right? It's the behavior. In your marriage, if you're not talking to each other, nobody's fighting, right? Okay, well, that's a behavior. Nobody's fighting, but that's not a behavior. That's a lack of a behavior, right? Mm-hmm. And then you go, well, yeah, but we're not mean to each other. Okay, right? Again, a lack of behavior. We don't. And if you listen as a marriage family therapist, I'd be like, well, it sounds like you guys got all the don'ts down, perfect, but you're doing nothing, right? The behavior is that you're doing nothing, and you're wondering why your life is less than optimum for you, right? Because that's what really the key is people come to therapy because they want to be better. They want their children to be better. They want their marriage to be better. The fail is that people won't do anything. They're like, they will be polite. They're like, let's talk to Johnny, we really just don't like how you are handling that situation. It's like, ooh, boy, you got a lot of anger there, son. But there's no additive thing. It's kind of a commentary. And marriage, the same thing. Well, she doesn't this, and I don't. But are you guys mad? Well, no, he's not mean to me. It was like, well, that's not what we're talking about. Is there a thing there? What is it that's not optimum? And in our case, I think with children is that we have replaced, in a lot of ways, we've kind of thrown our hands up because the technology thing is just so big. They got to have a phone, right? In this world, we got to be able to know where they're at in a world that's, gotten really bigger and smaller at the same time. And ask your kid to turn their phone off. They may do it, but it's stapled to them. Ask them to put it in another room, for game night, those kind of things. It's an uphill battle, right?
Now, this is important, and I've talked to other scientists about this, and my encouragement to those young parents when you have your kids as they're growing up, and Elizabeth, who is one of our our teammates. She does this. What is it? They don't get a phone till they're a freshman in high school. They do not have any social media apps. It is established that it's her phone, not theirs, which is legally true.
Of course. True.
And that the phones get docked in the living room or in the kitchen at bedtime.
Right.
And so she's got some by the way, mom is going to inspect your phone on demand. And usually she does it weekly. So at any time she can take your phone. And I think if you establish these parameters up front, and one thing that we talk about is love is a tough thing. Saying no is love to your kids. And the reason we say no to our kids is for two reasons. There's two things about it. And that is, number one, we've experienced some bad things in our life. And number two, I don't want to tell you what I've experienced. Okay. I just want, and that's a really tough dilemma to be in when you're trying to train your children, where you say, look, I know what's best for you, and I'm not going to tell you why. Mm-hmm. But I do think there are some things that we are better kept away from our kids. And that's just my personal belief. Today, there are a lot of parents that did some really stupid things that they may be embarrassed about. They could have been illegal. Who knows? But it's their burden to bear. And however, if you establish with your kids, here's your phone, I'm getting this for you, I'm getting it to you at what I call an age appropriate. And me, man, I think age appropriate is probably when they start driving. But I wish I would have understood those other things because of social media app. Now, keep in mind, as a parent, there was a movie out on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, and they testify in front of Congress. Twitter, Facebook execs testified that your child, and this was in 2020, when it was released, your children are getting 3 AIs that are talking to them 24/7 minimally, which that number has got to be greater. So as parents, we have to compete against that. We have to compete with value sets that we establish with our mates, right? So when you got married, you took 80% of what your parents, I'm using this fake number, but you took a percentage of what your parents taught you. Your spouse took a percentage, and you combine them. That's your value set, right? And then you're establishing with your kids, and you hope and pray they take the maximum amount from you and do the same thing. Okay. But you're competing with an AI. AIs don't sleep. They don't care. They don't get upset.
And then you're with, there's so much to talk about there. And I know we're running down on this segment, but do we have another segment to go?
We have, yes, we do.
Okay. Well, then there's no need to try to jam it in 9 seconds.
All right. Well, listen, folks, we got to stop for a commercial break, and we will be right back with JT Turner on Their Children.
Here to review this V4CR coffee, Veterans for Child Rescue. Getting rid of child trafficking all around the world.
Rescue Roast. This is being offered strictly to fund our operations. We found a great roaster, chosen our 3 favorite flavors. And our light, medium, and dark roast, we're offering it right now in pre-ground form. If you want to enjoy it in K-cups, we have stainless steel cups on our website, and they are reusable. Just take the coffee and pour it into the cup. Close it up, put it in the machine. Oh yeah. So go to our website right now, v4cr.org. Order as much as you want on our shop page. We're grateful for your continued support. We're excited about what this means as far as boosting the funding for our operations. Thank you so much for your continued support. God bless.
Welcome back to Defending Our Children. And one of our sponsors, chemicalfreebody.com, they have a product called Green 85. I don't know, JT, if you've tried this. If you haven't, it's something you should look into. But basically, it's 85 of the vitamins and minerals that your body needs on a daily basis. This is a powder form. Tim James is the creator of this product. He's been a guest on our show. He is a great supporter of ours. And at chemicalfreebody.com/DOC, you can check out this product and many others that are all some made from the finest ingredients. They have no fillers. I highly recommend them. They will help you to feel younger and heal your body and much, much more. So go check that out. Anyway, so JT, we had to kind of stop in the middle of a break time for our topic. And I was talking about phones and how I felt about the role of phones as it pertains to our kids. And so I had my beliefs. And so, but I do think that these phones interfere with parenting. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely. The dilemma I see is the social world that the children are growing up. For instance, when we were young, your parents could have sent you to, you went to school. You went to this school, that school. Some parents were able to say, you know what, I don't want them to be in public school. I want them to be in private school. They had a control over a social environment that the child was going to grow up in, quality of education they were going to get. That is to say that, the social world, inevitably people were homeschooling their kids, right? And many would say, wow, your child's not going to have prom. They're not going to, have to learn how to deal with 300 classmates or, a large part of what school does is get your children out there to learn how to navigate society. With the canvas that they are painting on these days, when you say, okay, my 14-year-old child, I don't think that they should be subjected to, what's available on the phones. I'm not going to give them a phone. Well, what you've done is you've said, okay, I'm going to homeschool my child, right? I'm going to take them out of the milieu, and that's, how they're going to grow up. Now, what did you recognize about people that were homeschooled versus, some others? Let's look at back in our day, somebody that came from, maybe a more rural area, whereas I grew up in the suburbs. That rural person moved a little slower. Their education wasn't as, on point, the level that they were coming in at times. And I think that that's what you end up doing if you restrict your kids' opportunity for the phone. Not that it's a bad thing, but they're certainly going to miss out on conversations that are constantly happening. Perfect, fine, that's okay. But sometimes it's not okay because they will end up in a group of folks that are less knowledgeable of what's going on than others. Again, okay, is that a bad thing? No, I don't think so. But what is it like for them? What kind of social death does it tee up for them? They're not involved. They're not getting invited to things on the fly. They don't know about these events versus those events. So it is a decision, like homeschooling, that you make based upon whatever it is that you make it upon, but it certainly has its drawbacks. And, at a considerable expense to, their child's ability to navigate the world that they're living in. And so that is not a problem as long as you're filling that vacuum with something else. Now, I would say to people that take their phone, they drop their phones off, they're not posting as much as other kids, they're certainly not as active on it. You have to encourage them to be active in other ways that even the score, or what they call, it's a will to power. See, if information is power and you restrict that ability for them to get information, they have to will to power in another vein. And that's where sport people come in. That's where people that are like high-minded, that are doing, trips or outside doing things. Without the opportunity to balance that power, to even the power dynamic, they will start to fail in things. They will start to fall behind, and it will be harder. Now, will they eventually even the power or jump up above the rest of the crowd because they've been reading and they've been doing all these things? Sure. But it is definitely a trade-off. And we can't just say, well, I've taken the phones away, so we're good. We have to add in, because there's a vacuum, And I think that's what Elizabeth would tell you, is that, it isn't just that I'm protecting them from the evils of the world by removing that channel, but I'm also giving them the tools. We're doing things together. We're broadening our minds. Yes, they're not just sitting watching TV. They're reading books, or we're having family time. But without putting something in, you create a delta for your children.
Oh, for sure.
So.
What Elizabeth does, I'll give you one example, and this is kind of going to be a knock on the parents. What she does is one of her daughters, she takes to doctors' offices and dentists, takes V4CR, Veterans for Child Rescue brochures, and she goes and passes them out and asks if they can leave a few for their people. And so what Elizabeth does is, what's interesting is about Elizabeth is she doesn't have any social media herself. She doesn't do any of that. And so as a parent, I think as parents, we get caught up in technology. We watch too much TV. We do too much social media. We play on our phones. And so instead of training your kids, okay, when my kids were young, they were Girl Scouts, and I was the dad. I was always the dad on the ice skating rink. I always have two kids, and I'd skate by the moms and dads, and I'd stop, and they'd all be on their Blackberries and their phones. And I'd say, you guys need to put some skates on. Oh, well, my back hurts, or I've never skated. Well, next week it would be kayaking, or the next week it would be at the trampoline place, Right. And so I would get on to the parents, because I felt like once these kids hit the tween years, they weren't going to be talking to us. And this was kind of the last chance to get them to interact with the kids. So parents need to look at themselves and be more mindful of what you're asking your kids to sacrifice. You need to make some sacrifices, because what's happening today is kids, once they leave the nest, they're out on their own. You want to know that you have a good relationship with them. And to me, the older we get, what a fruitful life for, hey, I did it right, is that my kids want to come back home and visit, want to hang out during the holidays and do fun stuff with mom and dad. Right. So I'm seeing less of that. Some of my friends, I never hear from my kids. They're married and they don't ever hear from them. Don't even get a text from them. Right. That sort of thing. So what are your thoughts on the parents and their roles?
Well, I definitely understand, you doing one thing and looking at them and saying, hey, do more like this because you have the wisdom. But the thing about wisdom is it's just something you can't spoon to people. You can't give it to them. And in that regard, you can be an example. It's what I say is like a light shines. It doesn't have to tell you that it's shining. It doesn't have to tell you why it's shining. It just shines. And I think that's what our children need from us, is to shine. And certainly, the people that are making excuses are going to be the people that make excuses until they stop making excuses. And when they want something, you'll know why they don't have it.
And I don't really think it's a sacrifice, JT. I think that by putting your phone down and by limiting your intake, and one of the things that I gave up like 10 years ago was I quit watching the news. I just don't watch the news anymore. I'll go look for it, but all it did was make me angry. And it was about things I couldn't do anything about. The world's on every day was the world was on fire, and it really isn't. I mean, there are moments when it is, but it isn't. And so your kids, they replicate, they kind of mirror. So your job, I think, as a parent, is to spend as much time, play sports, build forts, even chores. Teach them to do chores. Your kids should learn how to clean the bathroom and make meals and take the trash out and get the mail, those sort of things. And so what do you think about that mindset versus I think where we've ended up with parents just letting their kids do whatever they want?
Well, I've had multiple stops and starts. I've been a parent since I was 21 years old. I'm 57 now. I have someone under the age of 18 living in my house for all those years, right? So I have a soon-to-be 15-year-old daughter. And then you have your grandchildren that start to come around. And so like you think that you're going to get to the winner's circle and then you realize that you just don't get there. But what I do recognize when I think back to all of the fails of someone who was in the service and, the time away from the family that you have, the regrets that you have, I recognize that the regrets have always been about time. I think that that's kind of a well-known axiom, is that, the time that you spend. However, I also know that wanting to do the time and having the ability to do it with children who don't want you to spend time with them is a challenge, So the real challenge is to recognize their weakness as little beings and your weaknesses as a bigger being. It is soul crushing to know that you want to spend time because that's the only real thing that you have right now. That if you had to go back in time, you'd pick a day that you could be with your kids at a particular time. And then you realize, well, what if you are back there now? Here it is. Now is the time you got to come back to. You didn't get to pick this monumental Disney vacation thing. Mm-hmm. It's today, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at because if you go in the future and say, my kids are going to get older, I'm going to get older, I'm going to die, they're going to move on with their life, I'm going to miss them. If you conceptualize that if you had a time machine, but you couldn't control where you could come back to, and you recognize that today was that day with the insight of knowing that you're older, then how would you operate differently? And I think that makes it pretty simple that you would spend more time doing things that matter. That is to say that, people would say, well, work still has to be done. That's fine. Do you not think that you have time to reach out and text your daughter and say, I love you, you're beautiful, you make me proud? Or to turn the TV off and say, let's play a card game? Or if you can't, because you don't have cards, or you don't have this, or you don't have that, then you failed to plan because you didn't care. And I would say that future knows your failings. Ask them what to do. They will tell you. Go get some cards, get a board game, spend time with your kids, laugh at their jokes, listen to them. They're quite witty, right? And to me, that's the only real thing that a parent can do is idly they watch the world ebb away from them and they want to grab a hold, but they know that they can't. Because what have we learned? It's like, you can't force your kids to love you. Come on over here and hug me and give me a kiss. Stay near me. Don't run away from me. I'm protecting you. I love you. All that kid is going to want to do is to get away from you, which is the first rule of Parent Fight Club is don't frustrate your kids. Don't frustrate them. Listen, be graceful, right? They will have a temperance that will match that. I guarantee it. And now, if you haven't been doing that since they were born, you're not going to get the same response from the first 100 times you do it. But maybe 101, your kids will cut you some slack and say, my dad really does try, right? But you're going to get blamed for all the times you didn't try that they thought you should. Even I will. even having so many do-overs and stops and starts, I recognize that the way that they measure disappointment is their subjective stuff that I couldn't possibly know, right? Well, I was really hurting that day, and then you said, boy, go change your shirt, or you said, maybe you should wear something different, or maybe and you're like, you failed them, but you didn't.
Well, JT, I appreciate you coming on with me today. And I'm just going to point all of our listeners to Veterans for Child Rescue's website. You can go to v4cr.org, check out what we do. We look forward to having you next week back with us on Defending Our Children.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to Defending Our Children, the show that empowers the people with the information you need to know. Learn more on how to get involved and make a difference at vets4childrescue.org, because the children are worthy.